Hey, so this is the last of a three-part tutorial series on using Logic Drummer in Logic Pro X. In the first video, I showed you a little brief overview of what the drummer is in Logic and why it's so useful to get real live sounding drums on your tracks without having to pay for studio time, hire a drummer, get loads of expensive equipment out, or learn to play the drums yourself, or to spend hours programming it from scratch. This is a really easy way to get around all of that and to get some live drums on your track as quickly and as easily as possible. So in the first video, we looked at what the Logic Drummer was and how to get it as a channel on our track. We looked at how to muck around with the arrangement and the editor in order to get different parts of our kit sounding differently and to get different grooves. Then we went on to look at how to mix this in the second video, so to put it on multiple outputs, a few little presets to get the each part of the drum kit mixed properly, and a few drum mixing tips. So where we were up to at the last video, I've kind of muted where we're going to take it today. We ended up with this drum part at the top that was compressed properly, had a little bit of bite to it, and actually was sounding like a real proper drum track. And today is going to be some additional tricks and tips in order to make your drums sound even better than just getting one decent Logic Pro drummer track on the top here. I'm going to be using some of these extra channels down here. I've muted them for the time being. This is where we're up to at the end of last session. Now, something I mentioned last time as well was that if we get our editor up, as well as our drum kit down the bottom here, we've also got a couple of options for percussion up the top here. And I mentioned that what I'd done is I'd clicked on the claps, and what the claps do is it adds hand claps in on top of the snare just to give it an extra bite. What I've done down here is, what's annoying about this is, if say I want some shaker on this as well, if I click shaker, then it gets rid of my hand claps. Or if you click tambourine, it gets rid of my hand claps, which is not great, because what happens if I want to layer up a couple of these things on top? So the first thing that I did to make this track sound even better than possible, than it already was to click the plus, and I selected a new drum track. So selected rock again, and I ended up with this kit here. So it was exactly the same thing, so SoCal. In fact, I even chose a different drummer for this one, just to add a little bit of variance. So pop rock. Now, the problem with this second track, what I wanted to do with this second one is to have some extra hand claps just to make it sound even bigger with the snare. And the problem is that when you first, let's get rid of that. When you first import another drum track into Logic, it automatically pre-populates it with drums, like a drum pattern, because it thinks you're going to be creating a new drum track. But the problem is, if I played that on top of my normal drums, it's just terrible because it's two drummers playing at the same time. But what you can do with the second one is you can actually turn off every single piece of the kit, and you can turn off your fills. And if you notice here, this is a completely blank bar. Now, if I click on hand claps now, it adds in extra hand claps here. And if I solo that, what I've already done here is I've already added a bit of compression on top of here. So this is sounding a little bit better than the presets. If I stick that along with my drums at the top here, I've actually got two hand claps on top of my snare, so it's really getting that snare cutting through. Thirdly, because I went a little bit nuts with this track, and it kind of works out, I think, in the end, is I added some shaker. So again, all I did was, sorry, I was copying that clap there where it was before. I'll just say this as well. If you're adding in extra claps, make sure that the fill dial is not set, because even if you turn all the kit off, if the fill dial is still there, you'll notice right there, it will still add in fills for your extra kit, which you do not want. So just turn it right down. I'll also say this as well, is we do not need this to be a producer kit, because this is literally one instrument on one channel. The reason we use the producer kit, sending it out to multiple outputs up the top, is because we want to mix individual parts of our drum kit and process them differently. Whereas this is literally just hand claps, so we can just leave this on the stereo output. Otherwise you start absolutely caning your CPU and your computer is going to start crashing. Thirdly, I did exactly the same thing underneath, because remember, we can't select claps and shaker at the same time, and I want some shaker. So I invented a new drummer track. I deleted all the drums so it would come like that. So I got rid of the drums, got rid of the fills, and added some shaker here. Let's bring this one up here and tell you about this one first, and then I'm going to tell you about these percussion tracks down the bottom here. The third extra thing we did was add a little bit of tambourine on as well, the same way that we did the others. And if you look here, then you can already notice that I've done something interesting with the arrangement. And what I've done is in the intro is my tambourine is just playing along with the snare. And then when it kicks into the main section here, the tambourine plays a lot more complex rhythm. And it lifts the track at that point. It just adds like a little bit of extra interest. Let's just have a listen to that now. So it's just lifted those drums a little bit, adding those extra claps and shaking the tambourine. What I did, because this is a kind of southern rock track and I wanted that real like swaggering like Americana feel to it, is I've added some percussion. And one of the other drum plugins that you can find down here is we looked at the top one, rock, and there's a real drummers under alternate and songwriter and the R&B stuff, and then these electronic and hip hop ones are a little bit more electronic. And down the bottom is percussion, and percussion is exactly the same principle as the top ones, apart from it's just a load of percussion. And again, you've got a few different kits here, but if you click producer kits on the right hand side, there is the exact same ones as before, where it sends them out onto multiple channels. So what I did is I chose this retro percussion kit. And it's exactly the same principle as the other drummer. You can choose different players up the top here. So I went for a songwriter percussion player. I went for a retro sounding percussion kit. And you've got your wood block, you've got your jingle bells, your tambourine. I can never remember what the thing in the middle is. Shakeri. You got your shaker, you got your cajon, you got your stomps, and you got your claps. And it's as literally as simple as, like, say I want stomps in this. Just click on stomp. And if I wanted to change the rhythm, I could change the rhythm, say, on those stomps. And again, it's got this box here that goes from loud to soft and simple to complex. So I tried to come up with a nice arrangement here of starting off with, let's just select that on its own. Yeah, so starting off with just these two shakers here, and then the claps come in here, and it just adds a little bit on top. And the last thing that I did just add a little bit of cajon there. And if you add up all of these things together without the drums, this is what they sound like. And if I put the original drum track back in, and if I add that back in with the entire track, with all the guitars in as well. So that's all the ways of using extra drum tracks to get the most out of your tracks. There's two extra little things I want to finish off this little tutorial by explaining. Number one is endings. Endings are very tricky because normally that you would program your 8 bars of drums. Let's get rid of that on the end. So you got your 8 bars of drums at the end. But the problem is that it finishes on a fill, and the fill never resolves itself if you listen to it normally. Some of those guitars needed fading out properly there. But there's no cymbal hit to finish off with. So what you can do is right at the very end is press plus, and it adds a whole extra bar of drums, which is not good because basically it means that the drums are going to continue past the end of the track. But what you can do is you can shrink this right down, or you can use the scissors tool, but you can shrink that right down until all you've got left is this cymbal hit on its own, and you can usually see it with your eye. So if I press play now, it should just finish on a cymbal hit. So that's the way to finish. The other way of doing it is if I get rid of this cymbal hit here. Say I wanted my track to finish on the 4th beat here. So say I wanted my drums to finish right here, and the drums carry on for an extra little bit here. Now it gets a little bit fiddly when you start trying to get the Logic drummer to chop off extra bits, because if you see, if I did that extra little bit there, where before it added me a little cymbal hit, it kind of adds me an extra little bar of fill and it doesn't quite work out. So what you can do is this. If I invent a software instrument just below and just an empty channel strip, nothing there, as you can see here, there's no plugin on it at all. What I can do with these drummer tracks here is I can take the whole part, or this last part here that I want to tweak, I can drag it into the software instrument part, and it turns the entire thing into MIDI data. And if I drag that back onto my drummer track, it will play it exactly the same as if it was one of these yellow sections. But the only difference is that now I can actually double click on this. So halfway through bar 56 we want to finish. If I double click on that now, oops, I just select that there. So if I double click on that now, then you've actually got the MIDI data, and you can actually go and edit your drums. So if I press play here, so say I wanted to finish, in fact actually halfway through that last bar, so I want to finish on the 4th beat there, so I could just delete those two there, move that to one of my crashes, and move that. And see what that sounds like. Obviously it doesn't quite work out because the rest of my instruments are playing so that it finish on bar 57, but you can see how if I solo that on its own and then go back into our little arrangement here. So as well as seeing what comes out when you just use the editor, you can also, when everything's mixed and you're really happy with it, you can actually turn it into MIDI data and tweak it yourself. So hopefully that has given you a good idea about the Logic Drummer and how it can be very useful to get some real live sounding drums on your tracks. Again, there's more music production tutorials on my channel. So if you have a browse around, hopefully there's some other things that you might find helpful. If you want to subscribe, I'm going to be posting out regular videos looking at music production tips and tutorials. So hit the subscribe button, and thanks for listening. Thanks, bye.